Welcome to the importance and power of reading. I'm Michelle, the computer lady, your host. During some awful dark times in America, Black people were denied the ability to read, to learn how to read, to write, or to even own books. And that has hampered our communities up until this day. Now we're going to have important conversations about the importance and power of reading. Hi, everybody. It's Michelle, the computer lady, and I have an amazing guest with me, Miss Tira Hunter. And what she does is she shows you how to homeschool your kid. She advises people in homeschooling. She's an avid reader, and I cannot wait to ask her these many questions about reading. Welcome, welcome, Miss Hunter. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Awesome. Do you mind telling everybody a little bit about who you are, where you live, and how you get people to homeschool their kids for their success?
All right. I'm Tyra Hunter. I'm here in Florida, and I've been here for about 11 years. I'm actually from the Midwest. And we moved here. We started my daughter in public school. It didn't work out, so I took her out and we started homeschooling her. Which we transitioned into unschooling. And unschooling is where just plainly put it, where you learn from living life. Like if you learned math through cooking or sewing, just by living and by the child is very much in charge of what they learn. It's all about their interests. So I coach families to deschool. Deschooling is a process that families and or children can go through in order to free your mind, I should say, like let go of what you think learning should be and open your mind to what learning could be. And it's very freeing. So I enjoy bringing other families into homeschooling because I believe that when families find fun in learning and freedom in learning, it is limited. It is not limited to what children can learn.
That is amazing. What I found out is so many children have gotten behind in their reading scores and other things during COVID because the parents don't have the necessary tools or skills to help teach their kids at home. And so what you're doing is absolutely phenomenal. And I am so happy to have you here today.
Thank you.
Now, as we begin, I've got a series of questions that I want to ask you. And one of them is, did you like reading as a child?
Loved it. Loved my I honestly, as far as back as I can remember, I think I was reading between the ages of 3 and 4 because I knew I could read before I started preschool. My mother read to me every single night. And my favorite book, I remember the first book that I really read on my own was the Bernstein Bears, The Spooky Old Tree. And my mother used to read that to me every single day. And she stopped reading it to me. Like she would open up the book and turn to a page and she would ask me, "What do you see on here? What are they doing?" And I literally could tell her what they were doing because I was listening to her read every single night and comprehending what was on each page. And so when I would sometimes would say things word for word, and my mother would pick out the words on the page, like and or and so that is how I learned how to read. And so that was the first book I read.
That is awesome. So, who would you say is your major influencer? Was it mom, grandma, your aunt, your dad? Who was the influencer behind you reading?
Well, first it was my mother, but my mom is not much so a reader. My grandmother is. And so whenever we go to my grandma's house, and I grew up in my grandma's house as well, she was always reading, always had a book, whether it was the Bible or, she loved her Harlequin romances or whatever it was, she was always reading. And so I would try to be like her. So I'd go get one of her books and just sit and read it, to sit in the chair and read like she did. And so eventually I could read and I started reading her books, her old
Wow.
Harlequin romances. Oh, I mean, so my grandmother is a big influence on my reading and how much I love it.
That is amazing. And that's why it takes a village to raise a child. And so having a grandmother that read, even though our parents might not read as much,
Mhm.
those are the key things that we need to remember as folks. We can help our children read no matter where we are in the family cycle. As long as they see us, that modeling is so important.
Right. I
Now,
agree.
you said you started reading at an early age.
Very early.
Why do you think you started reading besides the parental influence? Where does reading take you?
Well, my grandmother told me, I used to sit by her feet and ask her, Grandma, why you like to read so much? You were always reading. She said, because I learned new things. I learned about different places that I've never seen. I learned about how people live, and how people love. And she just made it like she was watching a TV movie while she was reading, like she could actually see the story unfold. And that just astonished me. And I was like, I want to do that. I want to have a movie in my mind. So that's what I thought as a kid reading would be like. Well, when you first start reading, the books have pictures, so you can actually see it. But the book she was reading had no pictures. So the pictures she was trying to explain to me was my imagination. So
Correct.
reading really raised my level of imagination because I could imagine what people were, what I was reading and how it looked and where that place was. And if I didn't know a place, back in the day, I had to go to an encyclopedia or to the library and see how that might have looked. So, reading just opened up a whole new world for me as a child.
That is amazing. What an awesome share. Now, you told us about the Bernstein Bears. Was that your favorite book as a child?
Oh, that was The Snowy Day, Eric Carle books. I'm trying to think of. My mom had me read C.S. Lewis. Oh my goodness, there's so many, and each level that I read, she had Judy Blume, Beverly Cleary. Then I got older and I got into Sweet Valley High books. I mean, she got me series of books, and I read Nancy Drew, The Wizard of Oz. I used to have, like I'd have a shelf where there'd be my tea set and like I'd have my Barbies, but it was all filled with books. I mean, my mother, I just loved to read, and she helped me to do that. She took me to the library. I could literally go to the library after I got out of school, especially in high school, and I would just go to the library and just read biographies. And I just, and she, even though she wasn't a reader like I was, she knew what interested me, and she supported me in reading and putting me in reading programs. In fact, me and my mom and a couple of my cousins were in the Omaha newspaper. A certain football player was visiting a library, and he saw us reading there, and I'm in the newspaper. My mom still has the clipping of us all
That
reading with
is
him.
awesome. So awesome. So, as a homeschooler, as somebody that helps people homeschool, how important is having books in the home? How imperative is that for a child?
It is because when you have books, it creates an environment of wonder, of learning. Um, I'm going to tell you the truth. My daughter, when she first went to school, she went to public school. So I taught her to read at a very early age, but she was interested in reading. She had a favorite book called What a Mess that she would read as she was being potty trained. So she was an early reader as well. But she didn't enjoy reading like I did. She enjoyed it, but she wanted to read what she wanted to. And I was pushing her to read what I wanted her to read, which is wrong. Don't do that. It's all about what they're interested in. And she wasn't interested in the same things I was, and that was okay. Eventually I learned that she will read, but it's what she wants to read. And, reading is reading. And so
Correct.
So the books that were in our environment, our homeschool environment in our home, were books that she was interested in. She was interested in graphic novels, books about art. She loved books, cookbooks. She has so many cookbooks. As a gift, I bought her a full set of Julia Child books, French cooking. That's reading. Parents have to realize, though they're not reading what they may seem as the classics, as long as your child is reading and enjoying what they're reading, that's what's important.
That's absolutely correct. And Tyra, we have to stop right now for a commercial break. We'll be right back, everybody, with Tyra Hunter as we talk about the importance and power of reading. Stay tuned.
Since 1877, Jackson State University has been training students for a life of service and leadership to impact our global society. Ranked among the best HBCUs in the country, Jackson State University offers 47 undergraduate, 37 master's, 1 specialist, and 13 doctoral degree programs. Whether you're interested in the arts, education, public health, the sciences, or business, we're here to take you from ready to JSU ready. Visit jsums.edu and apply today.
Hi, everybody. We're back with Tyra Hunter. She's an amazing mom, and she's teaching us how she affects change with homeschooling. It's so very, very important that our kids read at home, and it's so very important that we provide materials. And as she said earlier, not reading what we want them to read, but just reading, whether it be a cookbook, a graphic novel, how important it is for us to read. So Tyra, thank you so much and welcome back. Now, I have another question. What are you reading right now? What's your favorite book as an adult?
I read a lot of homeschool books. I read a lot of unschooling books, deschooling books. But my favorite thing to read, because I got it from my grandmother, is romances, historical romances. Beverly Jenkins writes amazing historical African American romances. I learned a lot of history reading her books. I read a lot of books that have, that are thrillers, but romance as well. A lot of Linda Howard. So, I read a lot of romances, and a lot of people are like, oh, aren't, just it's romance, but it's more than that. It takes you all over the world, all different cultures, any time in history. I've learned a lot. And now my daughter at the age of 20 has picked up a Linda Howard book. So that's something that we can share now. I'm shocked that she would even be interested in that, but she's interested in that, but she's older, not younger like I was. And that's okay. That's something that we can share. So yeah, but I'm reading constantly.
That is amazing. So being that voracious reader and it takes you everywhere, are there any books that you'd like to recommend?
Well, as far as me being a homeschooler and an unschooler and really learning about how children should learn, I read a lot of John Holt. Um, that is a person that really is like the father of homeschooling, unschooling. A lot of John Holt books. Oh my goodness, there's so many. I can't. But yes, a lot of John Holt books. I do read that.
Okay, so now I have another question for you. How can people get in touch with you when it comes to learning about homeschooling? And what are the methods, or what would you say to them if they wanted to get in touch with you and start to homeschool their children?
Okay. You can go to my email. You can email me. It's the best way to reach me. My email is tyra.hunter, the number 40 at gmail.com. So
So that's Tyra, that's Tira dot Hunter, Hunter 40 at gmail.com.
and it's all lowercase, yes.
And it's all lowercase.
Right.
That way, for all you parents that are interested in getting your kids into homeschooling and that type of curricula, you can get in touch with Tyra. And she's going to be able to direct you, because that's what that's what she and her company perform right now in order to help parents. Now, let us go further, because As an educator and a professional, how has reading helped you in the course of your life?
Oh my goodness. In And that is something that I have made sure my daughter understands about when it comes to reading. Um, like my grandmother would tell me, when you read something, when you read and you get knowledge from what you read, that's something nobody can ever take away, and it is something that is yours. So what has helped me with reading is especially when it comes to my daughter, because I look at it like this: my daughter is the curriculum. That's how I was with unschooling. And so with reading, we went to the library so much. She learned so much from the library. You can go to the library, you wouldn't even have to buy curriculum. There's so many books in the library that teaches you everything: how to do math, teaches you about history, science, how to write. I mean, it's just unlimited what you can learn. And I know a lot of people that homeschooled just through the library, and I was one of them. I mean, reading is just, to me, it's everything. Everything. And when I tell my families, because they want to know what can they do, I always tell them to de-school first, which is to, get your mind out of the public school way, and just read. Read to your children. You guys read, I tell them to read together. Go to the library. Read everything, whatever your child is interested in. Um, Show them how to get that information on their own, whether it be on YouTube watching videos. Like my daughter had found so many different ways in order to read on her phone. My daughter, and when I thought that my daughter wasn't reading, she was actually reading comics, and now she's developing her own comic book. You
That
know,
is amazing.
yeah, yeah,
Oh my God. So she's into creating graphic novels.
yes,
Oh, and not only are they entertaining, but a lot of them contain so much great information. So that is absolutely awesome. And another source of reading. So, parents, you heard it right here. Reading can spur your children into a whole new world where you give them a life outside of having to work for somebody traditionally. They can chart their own paths through reading. That is absolutely amazing. So, within this structure of, now that you found out how she learns, because I think that's really important, when we
hmm
found out how our children learn, how they read for success in their own way, she's really blossomed.
yes, yes.
That is amazing.
She has just taken off when I because I was more of her guide along this journey. You know, like you said, it's being a good model. So because she was with me all day, she saw how I took care of things as a grown up. What you do in life, how you treat people. And we would sit at the table and read books together. We learned about health, women's health. She picked out some graphic novels about science. There's a lot of graphic novels about science. Oh my goodness. Comic books about science. And I mean, I never even knew these things existed, but it's out there. And along our journey, she got to so creative. She got to learn in a creative way. Going through school, I learned through books with biology, chemistry. She learned the scientific method through reading a comic book about a black superhero scientist. It's really
Wow.
cool.
That is
Learned
amazing. And that's one of the reasons why I'm doing this project, in order to make sure that parents know all these different ways that they can help their children read. Now, as an educator, what do you think the state of literacy is here in the United States? And what can we do to affect the change?
Well, I can only go by because I have been out of the loop as far as public school and what they've been saying. But I used to be a bus driver, Michelle, for 18 years in the Midwest, and so I was around school kids every day. and they could barely read or write. Not all of them, but a lot of them could barely read or write. And we're talking about junior high. We're talking about high schoolers, preschoolers. I used to drive, and so that is one of the reasons why my husband and I moved out of that part of the city we lived in and moved to another before we had our daughter. Because I was like, if this is what this school district is doing, I don't want my daughter to be a part of it. Because my
Oh, yeah.
daughter, my daughter could read. There's no way I'm sending her, because I didn't know, Michelle, that in the state I lived, it was not a law that your child had to read before they even attended kindergarten. I didn't know that. So I taught my child to read way before she started kindergarten. And how I found that out is that the kindergarten teacher, when we had like parent teacher conference nights or whatever, she said, I did not know that your daughter could read. I was like, of course. She said, well, a lot of kids don't read. Even in the district that was A plus, the kids did not have to read. She said she found out Zoe could read because she purposely didn't say a certain word, and my daughter raised her hand and said, you skipped a word, or that word says that. And she asked Zoe, well, how do you know that? She said, oh, I can read. So she said that was so funny. She said, but your daughter is so smart. I can't believe she can read. I was like, she can read and write, because that goes hand in hand to me, is reading and
Absolutely.
writing. So
So you and I love this conversation that we're having. We've got to take another commercial break. We're going to be right back because I've got more questions for you. Everybody, this is the amazing Tyra Hunter, and we're talking about the importance and power of reading. We're going to be right back real soon. Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Michelle, the Computer Lady, author and children's book publisher of the Mommy Readers Collection series of books. Well, we know how important it is for us to read, but we also know how important our public hospitals are. We're here in Atlanta. My public hospital is Grady. They saved my life. And I would like to give back, and I need your help to do so. I've created a new fundraiser called Building Towards Our Future. And what's going to happen is we're going to make sure, you and I together, that Grady keeps on serving the marginalized, the poor, and the indigent in the Atlanta metro area. All right, stay tuned for more announcements. I'm going to be telling you how real soon. Thank you for joining me in this fight to make sure that we can live with Grady. Wow, everybody, we've been having an amazing conversation with my guest today, Tyra Hunter. And we're talking about the importance of having books in the home, the importance of making sure that whatever reading a child does, you get them interested in what they like because they'll read more. Tyra, welcome back. This has been, utterly amazing because as somebody that was a bus operator in the school district, you're encountering children that weren't being able to read and they were going to junior high school. And you have a system that doesn't mandate reading for kids before they even come to school. And you also taught us how reading and writing go together because there are children today that don't know how to sign their signature.
mm,
That's crazy.
yes, I made sure that my daughter learned how to write in cursive when we began homeschooling. I made sure of that. Also, I wanted to tell you, Michelle, that when I was a bus driver, and I loved kids, I went to school to be a elementary school teacher, but I didn't finish. But that's another story. But anyway, I started reading Harry Potter, and my that's one way that I learned that I talked to my kids on my bus, because I drove a lot of grade schoolers, and they saw me reading Harry Potter, so they were reading Harry Potter as well in their school, and so we would talk. And so one day I was picking up kindergarten, and I was sitting there reading my Harry Potter book. A teacher saw me, and she got on my bus, and she said, "You read?" And I was like, "Yes." She said, "You're reading Harry Potter?" I was like, "Yeah, it's good. It's for every age, you know." And so she ended up telling the district about me reading, and they were having some reading programs about, going around the school, talk about how important it was to read. And they made me the ambassador.
Wow,
And
that's
so right,
amazing.
I was in the newspaper then as a grown up reading. They had pictures of me reading Harry Potter. So,
Well, and you talk about Harry Potter, and you talking about reading, and you talk about being a voracious reader.
mm,
My fear right now with the book bans, because
mm.
some of the Harry Potter books are on the book ban list in certain states. What do you think about this book banning situation, and how can we as the village, the community, help our children to understand that they should read whatever interests them, but reading the books on the banned book list is really good for them?
That is an excellent question. That is something that I've been struggling, just kind of upset with. I look at it like this: if you don't want your child to read it, don't let your child read it. But give the opportunity for other children to experience it. I mean, Harry Potter, I read as an adult. Little kids were reading it, and I tried to get my daughter to read it. She could never get into it, but she liked the movie. She did read a couple of them. It just wasn't her thing. So I believe in giving children. That's just me. I believe in giving them a choice. Is this something you're interested in reading? If you have any questions, as a parent, read with them. See why it's on the list. And if they have questions, be there to answer any questions that they may have about it. I feel that that's taking a lot of to me, that's taking parents' rights to be a parent to their children, and children's rights to experience different things. That's just my opinion. I don't believe it's right, but that's my opinion.
Wow. And see, I believe the same thing because my nephew, he loved Harry Potter. That was his every he asked me every Christmas if there was a new Harry Potter book out. Auntie, will you get this book for me? Because I love the Harry Potter series. And it made him a better reader because,
Mm-hmm.
as you know, boys typically have a hard time calming their minds and
Mm-hmm.
sitting down because they like to be active and jump,
Mm-hmm.
and they have that
Mm-hmm.
whole, not all boys, but a lot of them have that
Mm-hmm.
hyperactivity.
Mm-hmm.
And so Harry Potter was a way for him to calm his mind, and he got lost in the story, which made him a better reader. So how can we help our boys
Mm-hmm.
read better? What do you think?
Well, I have two brothers and I have a couple of nephews. And I'm trying to think back to my brothers reading, and I remember my mother reading to them. They weren't such a avid reader as me, but as they've gotten older, they will read things if they need to. If it's going to give them information that they're searching for. Now, my husband is not an avid reader as well. So you're right, a lot of but he reads things that are interesting to him. So I look at to my nephew who's 5. He's starting, well, going on 5. Yeah, he is 5. He's starting to learn to read, but he has to read things that he's interested in. To me, when it comes to boys, I'm not saying all boys, like you said, they need to read things that are interesting. Like, I know my brother loved cars, and like my husband loved cars. I have a nephew that loves cars. My other nephew, he's grown now, but that's all he wanted to read about, or people read to him, or magazines was nothing but cars, how they were made, the different colors, the makes. So I believe if you can reach boys that don't like to read, if you could reach them at where their interest is, I think it would be a prize. What I had to do with my own daughter is she would read if she was interested in it, and it brought value to her, you know. So I think that boys, or whoever has a problem with reading, and to me sometimes it's the material of what they're reading. Like if it doesn't interest, now as a grown up, if you're not interested in something, you're not going to learn. You don't care. What
No.
makes you think that kids should be made to read something they're not interested in? Well, then you're going to get some. There's going to be a block. So yeah, it's all about finding something that they're interested in.
I totally agree with that because I know for myself, men usually, and boys read stuff to get something out of it. They need information. They're seeking
Right.
answers to questions, or they're
Right.
seeking something as a solution.
Right.
And so I agree with you totally. The other thing is, I know that boys like comic books. My
Mm.
brothers, I have 4 brothers, and that was the way my mom got them to read was she would just buy comic books, buy comic books. We would go to the comic book swap and get comic books.
Mm.
That helped them read more and
Mm.
better.
Mm. Yeah, my mother didn't like to read, but guess what she read, Michelle? Comic books.
Well, my father, because my father was born on a plantation in 1921. And
Mm.
so if he had a 5th grade education, I might be giving him a couple of grades.
Mm.
They were like sharecropping and doing those
Mm.
things. And so reading at one time was outlawed.
Mm.
And so for him, and being in the Navy, he gravitated to comic books.
Mm.
That was his favorite thing. And every day he started reading the newspaper. And so he raised me. He'd come home and we would read the newspaper together. He would point out an article,
Right. Right.
or the weather or whatever. But we would go to the comic section and we would read the comic strips together. And so that was that bonding time, because that's the other thing with reading and reading to your children. It's that bond. It's like if
Yeah.
you telling me that you and your daughter, what you read now, and she's starting to read these romance novels, you're bonding on that level.
Right.
And that bonding takes that whole family time to a whole nother level, because those are memories that no one can ever take away or shatter.
Very true. Very true. I
So
totally agree.
I got another question.
Okay.
What guidance would you give parents of both boys and girls on learning STEM? Because we know everybody, STEM is the buzzword: science, technology, engineering, and math.
I like to
And
add the A for art.
that's right, the A for art. So STEAM, science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. So what are your guidelines, or what ways would you guide parents to help them to get their kids to learn STEM and to know the importance of it?
Well, again, I go back to reading books. My daughter, I learned, was not a person that liked to learn from. She was she was visual, but she was very hands-on as well. And the visual had to be interesting to her. So when it came to science, um, like I said, she learned science through reading graphic novels. And we played games. They have science games. And so she also learned by doing um, like little science experiments, especially with food. She loves to cook, and cooking is a science.
Yes, it
So
is.
she learned about, what happens when you put a certain, salt here, or what makes things rise. So she learned science through her interest, which was food, because she loved to cook, and through reading graphic novels and playing games. She learned science through that. She learned history the same way. We played games. A lot of times while she was painting, I would read her history, and she would paint what I was reading. Like I remember we learned about Ruby Bridges, and I was reading her the story about her. And as I was reading the story to her, she was drawing a picture about a little girl being led into a school. But she was listening to me and really understanding what she was listening to, because she was drawing about it. So that's how she
Wow.
learned history, is through her art. That's how she learned writing. She loved to write creatively. Um, we used to play a game where you could throw these dice, and they have different pictures on each one, and you would roll them, and you'd have to make up a story by looking at the pictures. So she learned how to write that way, and then I would check I would tell her, oh, this needs to be capitalized, or this needs a comma there. So we learned grammar that way. And also, she told me that she learned how to write very well because she read books. So that's why I said reading and writing go hand in hand.
You are absolutely correct. Now, as we close, in summary, I would like you to give parents out there 3 to 5 keys of how to make sure their children read well, if you don't mind doing the reiteration of this conversation.
Well, first of all, I agree with you. To me, relationship is key. It's reading with your child, sitting down, taking the time. It can be outside, it can be in a nice, quiet area in your house where you're comfortable, and you can sit and read to them. I learned reading through my mother reading to me first, and by reading a certain book so many times that I could practically read it back to her word for word. I just didn't know that those were the words on the page until she showed me that. So definitely having a relationship with your children, having that bond with him is very important to me. Also is reading things they're interested in. What are your interests? My daughter's interest was learning how to cook, so we would read recipe books. you know she liked playing games, so I'd have her read how to play it. So get books that your children are interested in, or have your children pick out the books they're interested in. And a lot of times my daughter was interested in Ripley's Believe It or Not, or different things like that, that would be facts about different things. She loved books on facts and how to do things, how things were made. So really the interest is also be supportive in their reading. Don't make them read. You can't make somebody do something. Some kids will learn how to read early. Some kids will probably read later. I know a lot of families who are homeschoolers, because they don't have to adhere to what society says you have to read at this age. There are a lot of kids that don't start reading till they're 7, sometimes 8, and they read beautifully. And they have a love for reading because they were never made to read. So that's very important, is to make sure when it comes to reading that it's very respectful of how they feel, or there may be a problem. I'm trying to think of another thing how it and just I don't know. My daughter, when it came to reading, there was no expectation. At first, I had expectations. You need to read this. You need to read that. And I did have worries, like, oh, my child, is not gonna. But they will read. Nobody is going to say when my daughter is 30, well, Zoe, when did you learn to read? Nobody cares. So, they will read on their own time, and it's about, you know, I learned about what my daughter was comprehending by what she was reading just by talking to her. Ask her, did you like that book? What about the book did you like, or did you dislike it, or and I learned that if she liked the book, she would find books that were similar to that book. So, I could go on and on about reading, but I know we don't have the time.
Well, this is the deal, and I'm so glad you're shared. Tyra, you've been an amazing guest. I can't tell you how much you've blessed us with your presence and what you had to share.
Thank you.
Oh, and you're doing an amazing job. And I want everybody to know, if you're interested in homeschooling, you can contact Tyra by email at Tira.Hunter, HENTER 40 @gmail. We're going to put a link for you guys so you know how to get in touch with her. And she's going to teach you how to unschool, get out of those bad habits, and help your children succeed. Tyra, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for.
Now, for everybody, I want you to know one thing. Number one, make sure that you have books available. That's what she said. Make sure you build these relationships. Make sure that in order to foster that love, you model. Tyra was able to model her grandmother. And because of that modeling, it helped her have this voracious appetite for reading. But also make sure that you love them where they are. Because if they see you reading and you give them what they're interested in, they're going to want to read. As far as book bans, see what books are on the ban and have a discussion with your child in order for you to make sure that they get what they need and they learn how to read. I'm Michelle with the PIC TV Network. Thank you so much for joining me for this presentation on the importance and power of reading. We'll see you next time. Are you a company, business, or service that believes in social responsibility? Would you like to make a positive impact? You can. You can sponsor this program and be seen by 2 million viewers on the PIC TV network. Call 770-367-1268 for more information today. Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle, the Computer Lady, the host for The Importance and Power of Reading. We're going to have some great guests on. Dr. Hudson from Jackson State University, Moses West from the Moses West Foundation, Gina Gadsden, and so many more. And we're going to talk to you about the importance and power of reading and how we can get our kids to read more. Come join me on the PIC TV network. You're watching the PIC TV network, channel 1000.